When we talk about reliability, we usually focus on materials, processes, test methods, and standards. But what if one of the most overlooked reliability risks is who is not at the table when engineering decisions are made? Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to Reliability Matters, the podcast where we explore not just how systems are built, but how people, culture, and decision-making shape whether technology performs as intended over time. Today's episode focuses on women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and why this conversation extends far beyond mere representation. It impacts how problems are defined, how risks are identified, and how resilient our technologies ultimately become. My guest today is Kristen Eckart, an accomplished engineer whose career includes working in high reliability environments at Lockheed Martin. While Kristen's background includes complex systems where failure is not an option, this conversation is not about any specific product or program. Instead, it's about the broader experience of women in engineering, the barriers that still exist, and why attracting and retaining women in STEM is essential to the future of technology and manufacturing. For those of you working in electronics manufacturing, quality, reliability, or engineering leadership, this discussion connects directly to how teams make better decisions, reduce risk, and design systems that perform reliably in the real world. This is a conversation about engineering excellence, opportunity, and why who we include ultimately matters. My conversation with Kristen Eckart begins right now. Stick around.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Kristen, welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're my guest today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, you've built a very successful engineering career at Lockheed Martin. When you look back, what first pulled you toward engineering in general and STEM? What sucked you into this crazy end of the world?
Early on in my career, I knew that I wanted to go into STEM. I remember very vividly entering my junior year of chemistry class. My teacher had a huge bowl of water in the front of her classroom, and we were talking about the periodic table. She put some sodium into the water, and of course, sodium and water make an exothermic reaction, and she put a little too much in there, and the water exploded, and it hit the ceiling, and I just thought that was the coolest thing to see happen. I tell everybody from 7th grade on, I wanted to be a marine biologist, so I knew I wanted to go into some sort of STEM. I really wanted to swim with the whales at SeaWorld. But life happens, you change careers, you pivot. I ended up going into chemistry and then finally into mechanical engineering.
Regarding your life happens comment, it's often said, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans, right?
Right. If anybody thinks their career is a straight line, it's just not.
I got interested in science in general. I wouldn't qualify it as STEM, but when I was young in school, probably junior high school, I had a completely crazy science teacher. And when I say completely crazy, it didn't seem crazy at the time, but looking back, one of the things he had us do when we were talking about elemental charts and things like that, put our hand out, and he had a glass jar filled with mercury, and he put mercury in all of our hands, and we kind of played with it like one would play with a slinky. We just let it flow from one hand to another, to another, to another, and occasionally some kid would drop it on the floor, and it would just break into 100 different tinier mercury balls, and we'd scoop them up with a piece of paper, put them back in our hands, and then use our hands as a funnel to get it back into the jar. And now, looking back, I'm like, that probably wasn't very good, right? And then one time, he wanted to explain how warm air rises. So he had a big plastic trash bag, like a 50-gallon trash bag. And at the bottom of the trash bag, he used coat hangers to form a ring. and then he put some wire in a cross shape and soaked like giant cotton pads in alcohol and lit it on fire. And of course, the bag filled up with hot air and took off. And eventually the fire went out, or almost went out, and the bag landed while slightly still on fire on top of a tree and caught our school trees on fire. And I just remember thinking between the toxic chemicals on our hand and lighting trees on fire, I want to learn more about this science field, right? Probably not the best definition of STEM, but it really got me hooked.
Yeah, and always, I think a lot of people love fireworks, right? It's amazing the chemistry and the science that goes into creating fireworks.
Yeah,
It's
well, not just
phenomenal.
chemistry, but aerodynamics and the laws of gravity and all that stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of science
Science is
in one
fascinating.
package.
Yeah.
Life is
Yes.
fascinating. So,
Yes.
was there a moment or a mentor or a problem that kind of hooked you? That took you away from swimming with the whales at SeaWorld and put you in a maybe slightly more practical career path?
Yeah, I think it was my freshman chemistry professor. Again, I did like chemistry, but I was really going kind of biology route. And he asked me to actually tutor freshman chemistry my sophomore year. And I think that really kind of put me on a path where, oh, I'm pretty good at this chemistry stuff. I get to now teach it to freshmen. Uh, and yeah, so I actually went to become a chemistry teacher initially before I switched to engineering. Again, it's this revolving snowball of your career and your life and where it goes and how it moves.
Making God laugh. Yeah, exactly. Early in your career, did you realize you were often the only woman in the room or one of the very few?
Yeah, so I did that before my career actually started because when I switched to engineering, I was the only girl in many of my classes, which thankfully I think has changed. There's probably 2 or 3 girls now in a classroom.
A 300%
But
increase, right?
that's right. Yeah, and it's just interesting because I mean you're kind of by yourself. You have to navigate things yourself. I remember in my computer programming class, the final project was to build a baseball game. So you had to build the bases and the innings and all of those things. And I
Wow.
remember teaming up with a couple of my peers, of course, that were men, and they kind of helped me through that whole area. But that was our final report: is building a baseball game.
Uh, Going back to when you realized that you were often the only woman in the room, how did that awareness shape your confidence, positive or negative, and approach to problem solving? Do you think you would have a different approach to all of that, your confidence, your problem solving skills, had it been, 50-50 mix, or do you think it affected you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be more creative. You have to make friends. You have to make sure that you're finding those people and building your network. And I think that's super important in anywhere in your life, but especially if you are the only woman in your class. So I think it helped. But I think it could be a negative for some people that may be a little bit more introverted. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later around what kind of takes women out of STEM.
Right.
But
Retention.
yeah,
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah. Getting them in
yeah,
is one thing. Keeping people in
keeping
is
them.
another thing. Yeah. In high reliability environments, just like where you work now, daily, failure isn't an option. That's a Hollywood line. Failure is not an option, but it's actually a reality as well. How does engineering rigor and systems thinking show up in your daily work? I mean,
Yeah, so
you're
I
a long
am.
way from Wales, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I actually run the process engineering team for our facility, and what we do there is, we build the circuit cards and we do all of the top level building and things like that. So every day I'm reading our process procedures, we're updating our process procedures, we're training staff on the floor. We're really doing all of that work every single day to ensure that people are getting what they need from a quality perspective.
Yeah. Electronics manufacturing audiences live and breathe process discipline, right? I mean, you're running a whole process department. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, where do you see the biggest reliability risks introduced? Is it design, materials, manufacturing, human factors, something else, all of it?
Yeah. So again, I think there's a whole bunch of things in there. Material is a big one, especially since COVID with our supply chains. We really need to make sure that we know where our products are coming from. Human factor, that's always there. We are human people. We do make mistakes. But we have checks in there to ensure that the product doesn't get past the next stage gate, for example.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's about building in those checks and making sure that your quality systems are doing their job to make sure that at the end you're coming out with a reliable product based on all of those factors.
Do you believe diversity in engineering teams directly impacts reliability and risk reduction? Mm-hmm. And if so, how have you seen that play out in real programs or projects in the real world?
Yeah. So again, I think teamwork is critical for anything. We always say that no one can do anything alone.
There's no I in team, right? There's no I in team.
That's right. There are no I's in team. And then again, it's really talking about what a team is. So I remember I had to take a class one time on working groups versus teams and the difference between them. The one thing about a team that is vitally important is trust. Knowing your team, knowing that, you have somebody there that can back up what you're talking about and that can back you up in general. So I think team is so much more than just the word. It's about the feeling that those people have in terms of confidence and, having that support system.
Yeah, I completely agree. There, as we alluded to a little bit ago, there's a lot of conversation around women in STEM, but maybe a little bit less discussion about keeping women in STEM. What are the real barriers that still cause talented female engineers, technicians to leave the field?
I think it has to do with a bunch of different things. One of them is getting overlooked for promotions. Some women are maybe not as extroverted as men on their team. So they're not out there, talking about every single little thing that they did, for example. They come to work and they do their job. Another one is flexibility in their job. Women have a lot of things, especially when they become mothers or they take care of their parents, that flexibility to really be able to do your work-life balance is critical for retention. And also the availability to grow your career. So do you want to get an advanced degree? Do you want to really, drive into a certain technology? And being able to talk with women about what their future holds and help them get there.
Yeah, I think we have an adjective problem in the real world where if a woman is aggressively pushing for a promotion, she might be looked at as pushy and a man might be looked at as driven. And, for the exact same actions, right? I mean, we've all seen it. And there's you can come up with all these different examples of describing a person differently based on exact same actions, based on gender. So, Kristen, in your experience, what skills or traits have helped women engineers succeed in complex technical environments? Is it technical depth or communication, resilience, or anything else?
Yeah. So again, it's a combination of all of those things. So what I found in my career is that you have to build your data. If you don't have data to back up what you're saying, somebody will poke holes in it. So really make sure that you have your baseline set and then your data on whatever you're trying to prove out. And then you have to have the confidence to be able to actually present it to someone. Uh, so your data could be great, your slides could be immaculate, but if you can't talk to what you've done, it kind of gets lost in translation and it doesn't come through as a win. It comes through as, well, I don't really remember what she was talking about potentially. So really make sure that you have your data in line, you know what you're talking about, you know what you're going to say, and then present it to the audience that you need to.
I can identify with that. Even as a man, I can identify with that in a different context. When I first joined this industry in 1985, I think a couple years into that, so probably around 87 or so, I was asked to give a paper at NEPCON. Remember NEPCON, the predecessor to Apex in Anaheim. And I did not belong in this industry. I didn't pursue STEM. I just found myself through happenstance in this industry, in a sales capacity, not even in an engineering capacity at that point. And I was asked to give a paper, and I was the third speaker in a 3-person session. And the first person was introduced by the session chair as, here's Dr. Eckart, with 17 PhDs, a Nobel Peace Prize, all this stuff. And then the second speaker came up as, Dr. Smith, with all of these things. He cured cancer in his spare time and rescues puppies and, lots of accomplishments. And then quite literally, they get up to me and the session chair had a piece of paper and he looks at our next speaker is Mike Conrad. And then he looks down and he turns the paper over and back, realizing there's nothing else printed on it. He just kind of went, welcome, Mike, and at that moment, I felt very underprepared. However, to your earlier point, I knew that I was going to have imposter syndrome. I knew that I did not have the same accolades and experience as my so-called peers at the lectern. So I prepared. I probably knew my presentation better than any of the speakers in that entire conference because I rehearsed in front of a mirror for weeks, and I had it down. And that was just, I needed the confidence. I didn't have it naturally, so I had to over-prepare for it. And that, to me, I had to do that once, and then I quickly gained my sea legs, and imposter syndrome left me. I can't imagine what it would be like to have to keep that level of over-correction, really, just to be on a level playing field. Because in my case, it went away very quickly. In some cases, it never goes away. Has that been your experience? Or maybe not with yourself, but with others? Have you witnessed that?
Yeah. So again, I had a totally different first initial talk at a conference. I actually had an invited paper at the Material and Science conference, and I did terrible. They weren't my slides. Right? It was just a disaster. And basically, you can either slink back into your office, or you can grow from that. And I remember giving a talk at the International Congress on Glass 7 years ago now, and it was fabulous. I talked, I told jokes, I was very open and honest with things. Similar to you, I rehearsed and prepared, and it was an amazing difference for sure. So
yeah.
You just have to grow and learn and know that not everything's going to go right every single time.
Did you used to work for Corning or something similar? Did you? You had
I did.
Glass background. Yeah, I think I read that. What made you go from materials to electronics in general? You climbed out of a rabbit hole kind of onto the field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So at Corning, I had many, many years there, but I had worked in all areas. I had worked in manufacturing very early on in my career.
Okay.
I actually worked there for less than a year and decided I didn't actually want to be in manufacturing. So I actually left and went back to college. So sometimes it's good to know what you don't want to do more than what you do want to do. Then when I came back, I went to research, the totally opposite way. Then I found my home in development for many, many years. And then I went into a commercial role. So my career with Corning spanned all of the innovation cycles. So then really going into something that really has a dedicated mission. Lockheed Martin is out there in the world saving lives every day. And it's just an amazing feeling to know that you're doing something to save men and women around the world every day.
Yeah. It's good that the mission is not gender specific. Can you imagine if we carry out many people's experience in trying to get an equal playing field? If a company's mission would be, we're going to save all the men and most of the women, that would be terrible, because your mission, Lockheed's mission, and many other companies' mission is to make the world a better place and to provide safety and security and all of that, and that is down the line equal, right? A company wouldn't last 2 seconds if it valued one type of customer more than another, right? So at the end of the day, it's all a common goal, right? So it makes no sense to have different expectations in the process of creating a common goal, right? It doesn't with me anyway. It doesn't land, and I'm sure with most people it doesn't. Many women have to advocate more strongly for a position or a promotion or a decision than their male peers. Have you, in your vast career, I'm not saying it happens where you're working now, I'm just saying in your experience, have you had to navigate that? And how do you navigate that, having to kind of over ask or over deliver or over prepare without compromising credibility or collaboration? How do you push that desire for a decision or promotion, whatever it is, and not have a concern about burning bridges or anything like that? Not that a bridge should be burned, but there is reality, and then there's what should happen, and sometimes they're different. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. I actually have an amazing story. It had a great outcome, but again, it's to this very point. I was working with a colleague of mine. He had recently had a child. I was still early on in my career. I didn't have kids yet. And he got promoted. And I thought that, honestly, I, did more than he did. So I went in and talked to our common boss, and I said, hey, I would like a promotion. I've been doing all of these things. And he blatantly told me no. So what I had to do is I immediately went back to my desk. I remember this like it was yesterday. I went back to my desk. I spent hours putting together everything that I had accomplished over the last few years. And I put it in an envelope and I put it on his chair. I ended up getting the promotion.
Wow.
But I had to go through that extra work to basically prove that I was, willing for it.
Yeah. You almost had to put your thumb on the scale for an equal measurement, right? Which makes no sense. But I've heard it said, years ago, and I can't remember what context, but it was a similar situation. Someone was applying for a promotion and it went to the man. And the justification, as I was told, was that, the man's the breadwinner. So, we're going to make sure he can support his family. And they thought that somehow that philosophy benefited women because, the man brings home more money. And I'm just like, what is this, Fred Flintstone, time? Are we in Bedrock? But anyway, I always thought that, and maybe it has to a certain degree, but some of that died off with prior generations. It was generational thinking, which may have been more common at the time, but we're not in that generation anymore. Many of my viewers and listeners work on factory floors in process engineering or quality roles, among others. What advice would you give women entering electronics manufacturing specifically?
Yeah, I would say first off, it's a great time. Right now, there are amazing innovations happening. Just looking at the last few years and the size of typical components on a board, for example, it's amazing. The form factor and also the size that we're seeing and how many more we can fit onto, a board of a very small size. So I would say it's a great time to come in. The world needs us. They need people out there on the floors. They need people to still be building and still be engineering solutions to many of the issues that we have in manufacturing.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it just for the record. Do you see enough women represented in manufacturing leadership, quality, reliability, operations? And if not, what needs to change to improve that pipeline?
I think it's really, so first of all, no, there's not enough women
right. That's the part
in that area.
That's the answer I was pretty sure of, yes.
That's right. Let me start with that one. There are not. I think secondly, it's about, building that, as you just mentioned around generation, it's about building the next generation of leaders and making sure that they have mentors to look up to. And it's also having that buy-in from leadership, which are still mostly men, to really see those high potential women that are in the process and building them up to make them kind of the next leaders of the organizations.
You mentioned the word mentor. How important were mentors in your journey? And did you actively seek them? Did they find you? How did all that come to be?
Yeah, so I actively sought quite a few of them throughout my career. Again, you don't need many. You literally need one or two really good people that you can trust with all of your concerns and successes, but also failures. So having a few of them, and some of them just happen. You may have worked with this person on a project and then not seen them again, but you had a really good relationship with them. So you simply just go and say, hey, could we have a chat every once in a while? But I think, pursuing people that you feel you could openly talk to, I think is the way that it needs to happen. I wouldn't want a mentor assigned to me. I really need to be able to open up and to trust that person that I'm going to talk to.
Yeah. What responsibility do senior engineers, both men and women, have in shaping the next generation of STEM talent?
Yeah, kind of the same thing as a mentor. They've been there, they've seen it, they've done it. Now it's time to transfer that knowledge. I know a lot of people that, for whatever reason, they like to hold on to their knowledge themselves. I think that, opening that up and knowing the fact that you know who you are, that you already have your reputation, it's time to share that with another person. And all that's going to do is actually make your reputation even better because you are, putting yourself out there and sharing all of the information that you've learned and building up the next wave of people.
Taking a step out of the male female, I was going to say debate, but it's not a debate, issue that we talk about. STEM just in general has seen a decline of enrollment, male and female. I think some of that might be there are other quote unquote sexier or perceived to be sexier professions. There's a lot of competition from influencers online, and there's a lot of thought that there's a quick road to success and money and whatever. There's a lot of illusions being marketed to young people at college age, and for some reason, STEM just doesn't quite have the same attraction as it used to, male and female. How do we get more humans into STEM? How do we make our industry? Well, first of all, I think our industry is incredibly sexy in terms of, which is probably the wrong adjective for this topic of conversation. But I mean, it's alluring, it's fascinating, it's exciting. I think, we build everything that we use every day. That's us, that's our industry. And I find that just incredibly attractive. How do we sell that, or how do we express that to younger generations where they're looking at, in their mind, flashier things?
Yeah. I mean, I think the perception of STEM, I think it is honestly trying to change. STEM in the past has been kind of nerdy, or you have to be really great at math and science to be able to follow this road. And I think colleges are really starting to try to change that narrative. They're doing a lot more internships. They're doing a lot more hands-on classes. I had an amazing professor who would literally say, "Oh, you could take this equation and use differential equations and figure it out, or you can do it this way and leave the math out of it." So there's a balancing act between those, and changing the narrative around STEM being kind of, nerdy and kind of only smart people can do it, to, look, anybody can do it. You just have to want to do it. And we can show you the way. And I think there's a lot more going on in colleges with support groups and communities and really study groups to kind of build people to that level, to where they feel comfortable in it.
Yeah, it's a lot more than thick-rimmed Coke bottle glasses, the stereotype of a nerdy engineer. If you could redesign how we introduce young women into engineering, what would you change?
I would change, I think it would start with your intro to engineering classes in college. I would love to see a woman professor that has actually worked in the world, and bring her case studies and her experiences to the classroom. Really kind of dive into the heart of engineering, what she's done, how it impacted not only her, but the world. And really hit home those emotional cues that I think, a lot of women attach to and could hold on to throughout their entire career. So I know I would have liked to see that.
Yeah. Let's zoom out. Let's take our airplane and go up, 10,000 more feet than we are now. Why does women in STEM matter beyond just technology? Let's get a broader perspective on that.
Yeah. So women in the manufacturing, science, technology world adds a whole nother depth to the work. As women, we think differently. We act differently. We, in some cases, are a little bit more introverted, which, that's why we need additional support potentially sometimes. But at the end of the day, being in those team meetings, driving home process steps, or, trying to brainstorm why a problem's happening, we really need those women there to be able to add that different way of thinking versus, the standard way of, well, we've always done it that way. Well, let's think of another way to do it. And women could bring that to the group.
So besides equality and fairness, what does the world lose when women aren't equally represented at the engineering table?
I think they just lose a whole nother perspective on how to do things and the way to do to work. I know a lot of women in leadership roles are organized. They're really focused in on process and building out the systems from a flow perspective. I think when we do not have women there, we don't have that potentially organizational and structured approach that many women bring to the table.
And finally, Kristen, for young women listening or watching this episode now who are unsure if she belongs in engineering, what would you tell her?
I tell her to find a community. I would tell her to keep going. If you fail a class, it's okay. Don't change to psychology. Stay the course. It will be worth it at the end. At the end of the day, take a summer course if you need to, or go to office hours, or find a professor that maybe isn't yours that you could actually get along with, and really just kind of drive the fact and don't get discouraged. Again, similar to many people's careers, you have ups and downs along the way, and you never know where you're going to end up. So keep going. And if you need some support, reach out to someone you trust and talk with them and get the help that you need. But don't give up after the first round.
I think that's excellent advice. Kristen, did you think you made the right decision? Should you have been swimming with whales at SeaWorld, or are you happy with where you ended up?
So, those killer whales started killing people, so now you can't even swim with them anymore. So I guess I made the right decision. I think
right. Say what you want about working in corporate America. It usually doesn't kill you, right?
That's right. That's right. So again, my career has been amazing. I've got to travel the globe, give talks on international stages. I've met so many amazing people. And I always tell people, I don't know what's next for me, but that's the exciting part. I'm not done yet. So your career is what you make of it. And, just have fun with it. Be confident in what you're doing and go get them.
Kristen Eckart, just getting started. You ain't seen nothing yet. So thank you. Thank you for illuminating this subject with me. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you reached out and wanted to talk about this. I think it's an important topic, and it's more than a stamp, on a card or a checkbox. It really is an important topic, and I do believe that both men and women bring common and exclusive traits to any industry, and it's more well-rounded when all of that is represented. So thanks for representing that, and thanks for sharing your journey and your advice to my audience, particularly maybe the younger female people coming up in our industry or in it right now that may be facing some pushback, that there is a path forward. And it's not fair that it's a different path forward, but it is a path forward. And ultimately, they can be another Kristen. And so thanks for illuminating that to my audience. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Before I wrap up, here are some final thoughts. As we wrap up today's conversation, one thing is clear. The discussion around women in STEM is not about checking a box or meeting a quota. It's about building better engineering teams and ultimately more reliable systems. In electronics manufacturing and high reliability environments, we spend enormous effort controlling materials, processes, and test methods. But talent, perspective, and decision-making are just as critical. When we limit who participates in engineering, we limit how problems are defined and how risks are identified. Kristen's experience reminds us that progress does not come from intent alone. It comes from mentorship, accountability, and creating environments where technical voices are heard and valued. Retaining women in STEM is not a social initiative, it's a technical one. If you lead teams, design products, or influence hiring and culture, this conversation is a reminder that reliability begins long before a product reaches the factory floor. It starts with who we invite to the room and how we support them once they are there. Now, that's a wrap on another episode of Reliability Matters. Thanks for hanging out. Whether you listened on your favorite podcast app or watched on YouTube, I really appreciate you being here. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes. On YouTube, consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribe. Those 2 simple clicks really help us expand our reach. And a huge thanks to PCB Chat from the Printed Circuit Engineering Association at PCBchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating the show. Got a question or an idea for a future episode? As usual, I'd love to hear from you. Just shoot me an email at mike@reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Want to learn more about the podcast? Head over to reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Thanks again for being here. Until next time, keep learning, keep doing it right, and remember, reliability matters. I'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.